I'm going to go over some housekeeping stuff. And while I do, I figured since we have a fairly sizable group today, which is great, it might be a little difficult for us to do a round robin set of introductions. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat, and this is how I'm hoping we can take attendance for the meeting today, and it will also be the start of our membership list. So I'll drop it in again for those who join in a minute. So if you see it come through a couple of times, it will just be the same link. So thanks everyone for hopping on today and spending a couple hours. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Sam Tank, and I am an aquatic invasive species project manager at the Great Lakes Commission. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the progression of this collaborative over the past few months, but we'll give a little bit more of an overview shortly. The objectives for our meeting today are to update everyone on the progress since we've met last, which was about a year ago now, which seems crazy. And then I want to make sure that we're all on the same page as we work through this transition of leadership, and we'll be doing that by establishing a system of governance today as well. And so I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. We understand what the requirements are of those who volunteer or nominated to serve in a leadership role on the steering committee, and what the expectations are of the different groups involved in this collaborative. So this is going to be a little bit less of a frog bit centered meeting, a little bit more of a governance kind of next step meeting, but hopefully by the end of this, we'll have set ourselves up in a really nice place to make progress on what we're really here to work on. I'll just drop it in one more time into the chat for those who just joined. Instead of doing a round robin, I'm hoping that we can just type our information into what's going to be the start of our membership list. There are spaces at the beginning if you'd like to indicate that you want to participate into any of the work groups. You can do that within these first couple of boxes. And I'd also encourage folks to just take a look to see who's here today. And if you want to use the chat during this meeting, that would be great as well. I lost my mouse. Okay, so our agenda today, we have a little bit of introduction, which I've more or less just done. And then Tom with Eagle is going to take us back through where we left off in December at our previous meeting. We'll have an opportunity for updates both from work groups on our app and data collection, and then an opportunity for updates from members. I do have a handful of folks who said that they're going to provide an update, but there will be time if anyone else wants to spend a couple of minutes providing an update on your 2022 field season. I definitely encourage that. And then the remainder of our meeting today is going to be focused on the structure of the collaborative. Again, I'll give a little bit of an overview on where we've come from and where we're going, and then we'll wrap up with establishing our system of governance. Any additions or changes that members would like to see to the agenda? Okay, great, hearing none. There will be a little bit of time at the end if additional agenda items do come up. Okay, so Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
All right, thank you, Sam. Give me just a moment to do some PowerPoint screen sharing. Both of these things at once. Fail. All right, you're going to have to see yourselves for a second. Avert your eyes if you don't want to see yourself. Oh, maybe it doesn't do that. That's good. All right, did I just flip it? I did flip it, didn't I? Oh, sorry. Early morning struggle bus. Hold on, I'll get there eventually. Now I think you should see the PowerPoint. Does that make you guys seeing
perfect?
As opposed to my notes? All right. Thank you, Sam. Good morning, everybody. My name is Tom Alwyn. I'm with EAGLE, Michigan's Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. I'm an aquatic biologist in the Aquatic Invasive Species Program. I probably know most of you, or many of you, or we maybe crossed paths, at least virtually, in last year's meeting. I'm going to take a little bit of time to do a summary of last year's meeting. It was virtual. It was in December. And I think there was just about 60 or so people who at least participated in some portion of the meeting. So we'll get down into it. I threw this up here because I wanted to violate the PowerPoint rules of too much text and too tiny of a text. But these are actually the objectives for the meeting that was held last December. I thought it was important enough to give you guys this stuff to read through while I talk a little bit about some past, and Sam kind of covered a little bit of this already, in that the collaborative was developed or established officially in 2018, and it did have a Michigan focus at that time, and we tended to meet once per year. The meetings initially focused really on sort of those first three objectives that are on the slides that you're seeing, and then what we did, some of the bigger accomplishments, I think, of the collaborative over time was to develop an adaptive management framework, which is what the collaborative has been working under this last few years, and then also developing some standardized protocols, for doing monitoring, and then also we did a fair bit of discussion on research needs, and some cool research projects came out as a result of some of that, I believe. And then one of the things we tended to do in a lot of meetings, and we did in this past one, is summaries. And looks like we have that set up to do a little bit of today too. So folks can share what they did at the past field season and maybe what they're planning to do in the next field season. What was new for the group last year was that fourth objective of talking about the collaborative structure, and discussing about the scope of the collaborative, and is Michigan a Michigan-based collaborative make sense, or does it need to be expanded? Because it kind of was growing and going in that direction anyways. So I will continue to violate the PowerPoint rules by providing an image with a lot of tiny text. But this is just the agenda from that meeting. I thought it was a nice way to just sort of visually see what we worked on. We did spend quite a bit of time on updates and from participants. That's these little blue boxed out areas on the agenda, basically almost a full day's worth, maybe even a little more, where we had 15 groups report out, and really just everyone has a chance to say what they did, what kind of worked, what didn't work, both from a monitoring and control effort standpoint, as well as an education and outreach effort. And then folks share some of their successes and challenges, and there's an opportunity for people to ask questions, and see, learn from one another, which is really a great value. So it takes a good chunk of the meeting up, but it really provides, maybe someone's new to the collaborative, hasn't done much with FrogBit, then they get to see what other folks are doing. So it's a big chunk of time, but usually pretty fruitful for folks. And then that fourth item, which was governance and the scope, we spent a decent chunk of time on that. Sarah Lesage led that discussion about that, and Sam and Ceci from Great Lakes Commission presented. They kind of gave us sort of some frameworks that other collaboratives, successful invasive species collaboratives, use, and essentially there was pretty broad support to move beyond Michigan and use structured governance. And the action item from this one was to seek a neutral backbone organization, which Sam sitting here is proof that was accomplished. and I'm very excited about that. The other thing that we spent a good chunk of time of that meeting on was work groups. There are 3 work groups within the collaborative. And so the work groups are framed around the strategic or the strategies that are outlined in the adaptive management framework. And those 3 work groups will be doing some presenting today. So I'm not gonna spoil their thunder, steal their thunder, whatever, about action items. And so, you know, the collaborative made some good progress on the governance and you know, finding a neutral backbone agency, and we will get the work group updates here shortly. That last agenda item down in the bottom here, information needs and next steps, is one that we always kind of do, and it's a chance to debrief and discuss, you know, what we talked about previously, or bring up questions, and that's kind of my summary of the meeting last year. I want to just highlight that I always put this slide of Drew Rayner in my FrogBit presentations. So I don't know if there's really questions on what the summary was, but I think that's it for me, Sam.
Thanks, Tom. That's helpful. I think that without speaking for our yet to be established steering committee, I think we'll probably have another meeting prior to the start of field season. So this meeting is very unlike the last one if you were able to attend it in December. I think it's an important first step, but we will have more opportunities for additional, I guess, the shop talk, if you will, in the coming months. Any questions for Tom? Okay, then we can move right along to our work group updates. Billy, do you want to kick us off with the delimitation work group?
I sure do. So I'm going to share a couple slides. I should actually, looking through the attendance list, there are a lot of new names I don't recognize on this, so I should introduce myself. So my name is Billy Kuiper. I work with Eagle Water Resource Division, so I work really closely with Tom and Sarah and Kevin Walters. That's our Eagle invasive species group. I worked with a lot of you, but yeah, it's good to see some new names on this, so welcome. So I'm going to share a couple slides here. I'll try to keep it pretty brief because I know we've got a lot to cover today. That showing up all right? Okay. So I lead our delimitation group and have for a couple years now, I think. I think this has been 2 full years. Some of the outcomes from this past December meeting was, you know, we identified a few key topics to work off of and work towards those objectives to help identify some of these gaps that we had with delimitation. I just briefly will chat about these, but basically it came down to better understanding where all the FrogBit was, and at least in Michigan per se. And that was using a combination of databases that are out there, so MISN, iNaturalist, some of the other research groups that are doing FrogBit work. So basically trying to figure out a way to pull all that data together and then have it available in kind of almost a live stream setting. So we're not working with location data that's a year or 2 old. So that was one of the big things we wanted. We didn't have that previously available, at least in a like a statewide scale. So that was one of the big research gaps that were, or knowledge gaps that we worked towards. Another big aspect was trying to develop some type of prioritization tool. So trying to, you know, as we have a ton of different people working on FrogBit now, so trying to standardize a way on like how do we develop where we should survey and then the kind of the why behind that. So I'll talk about a prioritization tool shortly that came out of that. As part of that, we also looked at some of the habitat suitability and basically ended up blending, you know, surveillance and habitat suitability into this larger prioritization tool. And that was really, I think, well, you know, we touched a little bit on remote sensing and some of the interest there. So kind of a subgroup of us worked on some of the aerial surveillance that's been done. So primarily Loyola, and then Water Resource Division had some interest through some pilot work that they were going to end up, or that we piloted this past year as well. So. So objectives from the work group that we work towards, with the idea that we would be done by end of 22. And honestly, I'd say overall we came pretty close to this. The first one being to streamline this integrated data set and having an available or live stream data set that's up to date. We did end up doing this for the most part through our Field Maps app, which Chris is going to talk about here shortly, through our prioritization tool. The second one was to update the app. So previously we'd used Quick Capture. It's an S3 product, very simple platform to identify where frogbit is and some qualitative densities. We did a big overhaul on that and ended up using a newer platform. So we used Field Maps, which is the next, the newest tool that Esri has, really pretty unique, awesome tool to use. So that's been updated. I'm not going to touch a lot on that. I'll let Chris talk about that next, but basically it's an all-encompassing, frogbit surveys, and we can also add additional species. There's lines and polygons, and includes a ton of different information that is now, pretty easily available to anyone who has access to those, to that work group. So, as far as site selection and habitat suitability, again, these kind of we started out as separate groups working on these and ended up blending it together throughout the winter or in spring last year, essentially getting the same kind of question of trying to develop some type of prioritization tool so we could look at, where to identify, or, what habitats are best suitable for frogbit, where is it likely going to show up, how does that relate to boating access and public lands and previous frogbit locations. So we did end up having I feel like a pretty solid product that came out of that. And then as far as the remote sensing, say a few of us met with Loyola to discuss some of the previous drone work that has been done, and then kind of like how to maybe advance that a little bit further. So we did do a small pilot project this past year. So the only thing I'm going to spend a little bit of time on, I do want to highlight this prioritization tool that we developed. I say we, there were a lot of folks involved with this. Just real briefly, it's just a Michigan-based tool right at this point, but basically incorporates several different layers. So watershed layers and coastal wetland layers in known frogbit locations and previous surveys. So this is a screenshot, but you can scroll through a whole long list of stuff that you can turn on and off, and that will help you identify locations to do surveillance based on the parameters that you think are most important. One of the tools that we had hoped to have is some type of flow chart to better understand or better use this tool. We actually ended up deciding to kind of reverse engineer that. So we piloted this last year with this big federal project we have with all the systems that have frogbit, and then are going to go back and basically we're going to use the work that they did to identify, we felt, or to use their work to identify the priorities that they felt were most important, and then see kind of how that fell out and how does it actually align with like what what was actually found on the ground. So that's still forthcoming, some type of better decision tool. Right now, we just have some guidance. Yeah, so had asked SISMAs initially to identify their priorities, what they felt are the most important for doing surveillance, and then we'll see how that actually compares to what was actually found on the ground. So look for more information there. I just wanted to highlight this, just a quick screenshot of one specific area, but what this prioritization tool looks like. This is a screenshot of Nyaquan area and Saginaw Bay. And basically, you can look at areas you can turn on all these different layers and identify different water bodies. So what you can see here is a combination of previous known missing locations of frogbit. You can see some public lands. You can see areas where surveys are have already been done recently. So these purple lines and blue lines and stuff, this is work that the SISMA head did this past year. So the idea here is you'd be able to take this information and then, see where a frogbit is, or maybe areas that have not been surveyed that are similar habitats. So that was a whole kind of consensus with this tool. We haven't had a lot of chance to really debrief on how it worked. I'm hoping that's going to be part of, what's going to come out of the work group again later this winter. So that's at least a screenshot of like what was done and what this looks like so far. I'm sure it's going to take some tweaking. So this is really the first iteration of what that tool is. So we also pulled in some coastal fetch data from USGS. So if you're doing work on coastlines, you can at least see where the likely locations where frogbit may or may not drift into coastal areas as well. That's all I really had to share. So I don't want to get into the app updates. I don't want to steal Chris's thunder on that. So yeah, Any questions on delimitation work? I'd say overall it's been really pretty successful. We've had a lot of folks contribute to this, and no, it's not perfect, but I feel like we're making some pretty big advancements from where we started with doing, frog bit surveys, and now it's pretty interesting to look at, kind of a landscape-wide survey approach. Yeah, Rachel, I see your hand up.
Hey, yeah, I just wondered on the color scheme of your fetch likelihood map, is it the blue areas that are more likely? Because I see the presence points around those.
So
Or
those
is
aren't
it?
those aren't necessarily present points. Those are locations where surveys are done.
Oh,
So
okay,
So yeah,
gotcha.
that's the problem with doing screenshots. I can't show the whole scale of everything. Diamonds are like where surveys were done. They may or may not have found frogbit, but information was collected there. As far as fetch, the darker patterns are where the heavier fetch are, is my understanding with this. So with the southwest winds, these areas around Garden Peninsula and stuff.
Okay, so the red side of the
Yes.
spectrum.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, Billy, and Kurt had a question in the chat. He asked, sorry if I missed it, but is the tool publicly available now? And if so, where?
It's not necessarily publicly available, but anyone who's interested in using it, all it is it's the same app. Sorry, it's the same ESRI group that is then incorporates the delimitation group. So we have one big ESRI group. So anyone who wants to have access to that, just send us the username, and you can have access to that. And Kurt, I know at least some of your group has access to that. So.
And I think that's probably something important to acknowledge, that everyone is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Billy, everyone's welcome to use these tools. We don't have a
Yep.
place right now that they're housed, but that's something that we're working on, and we should have them more accessible before the field season, along with some additional training resources and other resources for use as well.
Yeah, anyone is welcome to use it. I think currently we have like 54 different members of this work group, so there's a lot of folks that have access to it. But if you're interested in doing surveys or want to use a prioritization tool, yeah, feel free. Right now, everything is housed through Eagle, but we're kind of in the transition period of maybe transferring that over to Great Lakes Commission. So,
And you don't have to be participating in the work group, is that right, to use these tools?
correct. Anybody
Okay.
can use it. Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Billy. Any other questions? I know there's some issues with folks being able to access the chat on the web version. I'm sorry about that. Feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself if you do have any questions, since the chat doesn't seem to be working, and we'll continue Tom's trend. If anyone does enter anything in the chat, we'll read it out loud, so it's more accessible. So yeah, any questions for Billy? And do you have a timeline, Billy, on when you're planning to meet next?
Nope. Haven't really thought about that. Sometime, I guess, yeah, I guess I want to see how this meeting goes today. I think we'll see how Chris's presentation goes, and if there's a lot of questions about that, and kind of, I think that's going to spur some of the next steps and what we want to do. And then, right now we're trying to transition over to GLC. So I think once that happens, then maybe that'll be time for some updates, or that'll be a good time to think about changes. But I feel like we're on pretty good track for the delimitation group, unless I'm missing stuff, but at least according to notes and what we've identified, I feel like we're in good shape.
Okay, great. And Chris threw in the chat, and we can send that out in a follow-up email along with the notes as well, how to access the prioritization tool. Okay, Eric, I'll turn it over to you for an update on the education outreach work group.
Thank you. Let's see if I can get this PowerPoint up. Does that look okay? Perfect. Thanks, Tom, for the touchdown there. Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Elgin. I'm an aquatic ecologist with Michigan State University Extension, and I lead the education and outreach work group for the collaborative. And so we've taken a pause to a lot of the things we've identified through time, but I want to just give the chance to show what we have identified our major goals, and then some of the tasks that we have moved forward on, or that can be easily accomplished. One of the main reason for some of our activities being paused is we're doing right now, the transition from CMU to Eagle to now the Great Lakes Commission. And we thought that it was appropriate to, especially for some of our tasks where a website might be needed, to kind of bring in a lot of information. That's why we paused until this was more formal. So the purpose of the work group is to educate recreational and professional stakeholders about frogbit to reduce spread and improve management capacity. And so it's those two things. You know, our goal, are then goals that fall from that are to reach out and improve the public's awareness, to reduce the spread, but then also work with improving professionals' awareness and then improve their outreach capacity. So what we started to identify is that professionals may be out, managers may be out there doing the management piece of it, like control or surveys, and then outreach becomes a secondary part of the of management, which happens, you know, during the field season. And so we have come up with various actions to help make it easier for managers on the ground to get the word out, which will then hopefully prevent spread or contain a new detection, for example. And then something we haven't done a lot of work on is policymakers. This being important because ultimately it might be for funding, it could be for additional clean, drain, dry kind of activities. Something that we created a while ago for folks is to make it easier on having outreach materials. So that can be articles, it can be social media messaging, graphics that are already made for Facebook, for Twitter, for Instagram, and then also pictures of frogbit. And so instead of having to rely and reinvent the wheel for your area, we generated a temporary Google Drive depository. And so what we have here, you can see we have folders for articles that can be used verbatim, or you can take text from it directly into your own messaging. We have photos and outreach graphics that others have made. Some of them are specific to a region, but others aren't. And so they can be reused with your organization. We have and then also social media messaging. So different phrases, different language that can be used. This is really just trying to facilitate outreach, quick outreach, which is important, you know, for our new detections. Now it's temporary because Google Drive isn't the best for everybody. Some agencies can't use Google Drive, and there's just limitations. And so this is where we have discussed with a new website, some sort of depository of this material would be there, and likely password protected, maybe not all of it, but some of it. So then folks can jump in and take material as they need, and it'll all be in one location. Other tasks that were identified, but we haven't moved too much on, are webinars. And so we thought that we could tackle webinars in two different audiences, one being the general audience, a public, which might be, for example, here in Michigan would be a Michigan Stewardship Network. It can be the Michigan Inland Lakes Convention, and then more of a professional audience as well, and not creating our own webinar series, but instead jumping into an already established collaborative that has a webinar series, such as the Phragmites Collaborative, where Frogbit and Phragmites have a connection, and so it would be worthwhile to get that information to the folks thinking about Phragmites. And then one more task that we thought would be really nice for to facilitate outreach for our managers is to create an outreach checklist. And so kind of thinking of what to do after a new detection, and have step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, with help at each step to make it as easy as possible to get the word out. So, you know, as we are reforming here with what we're going to learn about today with the Frogbit Collaborative, I think there's a large role for the education and outreach work group, and a lot of great things that we can be doing in this next upcoming year and years. And so if you are interested, you don't need to contact me. You can actually, that spreadsheet that's been sent, to write your name in, you can indicate if you would like to be part of the outreach group, and then we will contact you in the future. So, any questions?
Thanks, Eric. And while folks are thinking of their questions, I do want to reiterate something you said, that, yeah, there's definitely going to be a large role for this group, especially as we work to reestablish a website that will be mainly driven by the input from the education outreach group. And as we think about what resources need to be developed and how they need to be shared and stored. So yeah, everything that you said, I think there's a lot of work for this group in the coming months, and I'm excited that we have a good base to grow on. A lot of the resources, you've put in a lot of work already to develop those, and so it's mostly going to be figuring out how we can get those widely accessible to folks around the region, now that we're not Michigan focused, but we're basin focused as well. And with all the work groups, they were historically focused on Michigan. So we really want to encourage those outside of the state to join and participate, because we're only going to know what your needs are and how we can help different jurisdictions by you telling us as well. Okay, I don't see any questions. Tom, you can go ahead, and I was re-looking at my agenda and I realized that I don't know how to add 15 to 20, and that it is not 45. So yeah, okay.
It's totally fine.
You've
No
got
worries.
so much time, Tom. Go for it.
Well, I'm just gonna go real slow. No, I do want to before I hop into this, address there's been some chat about access to the app. And some folks are having a little bit of an issue. I think I'm not going to address that right now, but the next agenda item is the app, and Chris maybe can help solve those problems. I suspect I know what's going on, but I'm not going to open my mouth and stick my foot in there yet. So let me see if I can get screen sharing to work properly this time.
Looks good.
All right. Thank you. Well, I'm back. The third and final work group is the management and assessment work group. And, just to provide a little bit of background for folks who aren't familiar, I mentioned before that the collaborative runs under this adaptive management framework. And that's kind of a big guiding document for the whole collaborative. Within that adaptive management framework, it says we will use adaptive management, shocker. But then it also outlines 5 strategies, and the strategies really helped to the formation of the work groups to help address those strategies. And the strategy that the management assessment work group is tasked with or is working up towards is strategic action 2, which you can see up on the screen. And so the group started, I think ultimately the goal for that is to develop best management practices for controlling European frog bit. The group wasn't quite sure how to do that, and to do that based on anything other than anecdotal evidence. So developing a protocol to collect data, to compare treatment and determine treatment efficacy was the solution. And that's the standard treatment impact monitoring protocol, or the STIMP, which I have highlighted in yellow. And that's really where this work group has been focused on. It was developed mostly by CMU folks, and then it's been slowly being implemented in a larger scale. And then, as an adaptive management framework, we have made some adjustments to it over time. And I think, yeah, that's good for that slide. Switch. And so if you're old like me, you know who this is. but this is sort of the deliverable that the STIMP outlines. You know, be able to evaluate impact, have it be not too burdensome, and give us that data that we need to then develop best management practices. And so what the STIMP does, and this is a link to the STIMP. It's published online now through a ResearchGate or something like that. But you can go and read through the whole STIMP if you're so inclined. But basically what it's looking at is it's getting information about the habitat where the frogbit is growing, the associated plant community with which it's growing, what water body type, if it's in a wetland, what wetland type, really understanding what the landscape around it looks like a little, both from a small scale and a larger scale. It also wants to know, density, area, and a lot of information about the frogbit itself, the health and condition of it. And then the STIMP is designed for, comparing pre-post treatment. So you would go to that place where the treatment will occur and you conduct the STIMP efforts roughly anywhere from 2 weeks to immediately before your management actions. And then after the management actions, you would go back a couple weeks later to redo the STIMP in that same area and then be able to do some comparisons on where the impacts to native plants. Is there still frogbit there? Is all the frogbit gone? That kind of thing. I just threw a couple pretty frogbit pictures on there. They're not really specific to this. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the STIMP is. It has its own data collection app, actually 2 apps. It's through Survey 123, and it's housed under MISSN right now. And that was set up during its early stages. And we're working towards consolidating that. Either Great Lakes Commission will take control of the apps and maybe blend them into field maps instead of they're in Survey 123 right now, if that matters to any of you guys. But I think there'll be some changes to the STIMP just from an adaptive management strategy framework. With that mindset, the STIMP was first piloted by CMU grad students in 2019, and they did some updates in 2020. Eagle started using it in 2020, and then it really wasn't until this last summer that we expanded it out. And Billy mentioned that we have a federally funded project with Michigan SISMAs doing monitoring and management of frogbit in their service areas, and we set it up so that they would use the STIMP to collect pre-post treatment where they were doing their management efforts. As a work group, we sort of had these 3 action items from the 2021 meeting. Was to increase STIMP implementation, not easy to say, to work on how to analyze the data. One area that the STIMP is a little weak on right now is the analysis of that data. It's currently just like a compare the frogbit density before you did your treatment and after you did your treatment. There certainly has to be more to that. I'm not a strong statistics or data analysis guy, but that was an effort the work group wanted to do. We didn't get very far down that path this year, so I think that will be coming back up around for this next calendar year. And then we also had on our agenda for the work group to discuss the use of control sites. And this came up as an issue, at least for Eagle. When we conduct frogbit management, our goal is eradication, complete elimination of the plant from that system. And so we don't want to use a control site. So that maybe changes some of the data analysis. So we kind of got to get into back into the STIMP and really figure out the data analysis side of it. We're collecting a lot of, I think, good information, but we need to make sure that we're collecting the right information, and then we're able to do some data analysis beyond just, oh, there's less frogbit there since we did a hand removal 2 weeks ago. It's kind of like I'd like it to be a little more analytical and a little less just a quick comparison. And so Sam asked Billy about the next meeting. I haven't gotten anything set up. I'm trying to decide if we meet again before maybe the next big work group, or if we don't, and maybe I'll wait and see how many people check that little box to work in the management and assessment work group, which is super fun and you're going to love it. So please check that box. And that's it for me on this one. Questions or concerns?
I would just
Did I
add,
miss anything?
Tom,
Yeah, thank you, Billy. I knew I'd forget something.
yeah, I don't, like I say, we didn't have a lot of plan for the delimitation one because there's going to be a lot of focus on this work group this winter. This one, we've got some legwork to do, especially as we start transitioning to GLC and then potentially maybe even to like a field maps platform. So if you're interested at all on this, yeah, we would love some additional help. That would be great.
Any questions for Tom before we turn it back over to Tom to talk about apps along with Chris as well? I think we'll have a little bit more opportunity for feedback in this next section. I'm really curious to know who's used the apps and which ones you've used and what your experience was as we're working on refining them and potentially moving them into one cohesive platform for the next field season. It would be good to hear that insight.
Yeah, and I really like Matt's comment of stimplementation. Stimplementation? Stimpin? I can't even say it, so, but I like that. Thanks, Matt. All right, so we're switching back to me. All right, I gotta try this thing again. I think I finally figured out how to do that, which is kind of nice. All right, so you may or may not have figured out that this is just one big PowerPoint presentation for me. Let me switch. Yay. All right. Hi again. I'm back. I'm going to kick off this agenda, but I'm just going to spend a couple minutes, talk a little bit about dig a little deeper into the app that we used for this field season, the data collection. And then, Billy covered some of it in the, and you may recognize some similar maps to what Billy had, but and then I'll hand it over to Chris Vandenberg, who's also with Eagle. He's our GIS guru, and he'll talk probably. I can consider him the gatekeeper and the master of GIS. So he'll give us some more insight on kind of the details on how 2022 went as far as using the app, and maybe give us some helpful hints for using it in the future, or maybe even next directions of where we're going. And then also in this agenda topic, we have a number of updates from folks around the region. And so I'll probably kick it back to Sam for her to direct that portion of it. 2022 was the first year, and Billy kind of alluded to this, the first year that we used field maps to collect data electronically. Prior to that, in 2021, we used two separate Esri apps to collect data, one that did lines and one that did points. Last year, field maps is nice because it can do points, lines, and polygons all in one app, so you're not bouncing around from app to app. It can be a little clunky, but it's still, I think, easier than jumping between apps. And prior to 2021, we used paper, and nobody, well, I shouldn't say nobody. There's a high likelihood that people were collecting slightly different data around there. So to me, that's really one of the big benefits of the collaborative and the delimitation work group, was that they got everybody doing the same thing with the same app, so that instead of, you can now compare across the state delimitation efforts, and if you were to do some sort of research, you could compare and contrast and combine all of this data into one. It is one big data set. So I think that's kind of one of the big strengths of the delimitation stuff. But field maps is, I think, was really nice from my personal perspective. I know hopefully we'll hear some feedback from others to use. It can be used online, it can be used offline. And so these are the same little orange diamonds that Billy had on the map that he was showing, but these are the locations that were visited in 2022 by folks using the app. and I think a lot of this is a repeat, but there's 54 members in the European Frogbit work group on the Esri for the Esri app. Some of those are individuals, some of those are group accounts, so multiple people may be using that. So I don't have an exact number of how many people use the app over this field season, but we got almost 1,200 points around the state of Michigan and in Wisconsin in the Green Bay area. So like you might not think that's 1,200, but there's lots of dots on top of dots. So the way the points worked for the field map app is it was sort of like when you start the survey or end the survey for delimitation, you would put a point down. So it's got some habitat information, location information, name information. It's just sort of like a starter point from where you're going to go. And then from there, you use the line function of the app, and you can walk around, and it lays down a little track of where you're going, and you select what type of. Oh no, I'm going too fast. Oh, come on. All right. Sorry. This maybe will help a little better. I grabbed a screenshot of the Green Bay area and work that Wisconsin did. And I cannot pronounce that river, so I'm not going to try. But you can see they don't have a point at this particular location, or I might have turned the point layer off at that point. But you can see that there's the legend here has, based on the color, is the density of the frogbit. So they have a whole bunch of this light blue, which means there was no frogbit in those areas. But they had some sparse frogbit in these green areas. And so this is, as you're going, you can switch over to talk about what density of frogbit you have on your path as you're kayaking or walking the shoreline or whatever you might be doing. It also has the option to throw up polygons. So if you have a big area of sparse frogbit, you can denote that with, rather than having to paddle all the way around it, you can estimate it and draw that polygon on your phone or tablet while you're out in the field. So it's really a powerful tool to be able to give us information on where work is done and how much is done. So you can see a lot of this is showing up just as blue because of those 1,200 points and survey locations. And I did no statistics on this. I just, by looking, it's mostly absent. So that's really promising. Frogbit certainly is out in our habitat and out in our regions, but it is not as widespread. It's not everywhere, which is really nice to know. That's a lot of absence on here. And if you zoom in, some of them probably have some greens, like the cued in space. I wanted to try to figure out how many miles of surveying were done, but I could not figure that out. That shows my inabilities to work GIS, I guess. And I didn't take the time to bug Chris about it, but that's something that I think I'm going to try to focus and get us some of those numbers for the larger meeting. I think that's really powerful to be able to say how much effort has been put into looking for frogbit in 2022.
Hey, Tom,
Yes.
real quick, it's 814 miles.
Oh, see, look at how good you are.
It's a good number.
Yeah, I downloaded the Excel file and I opened it in Excel and I searched and I couldn't figure out how to do it. So thank you, Chris. 800 miles. That's not bad in 1 year. For mostly what's probably kayaking and wading through wetlands as opposed to driving. So yeah, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. And that is pretty much all for me. I will kick it over to Chris since you're already chatting and let you talk about whatever you'd like to talk about.
Thank you, sir. I'm trying to turn my camera on, but I'm having some internet problems here. Give me 1 minute.
59, 58.
Yeah, put me on the clock.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's weird. It's coming up in my preview, but it's not switching my camera on. Well, I guess in the interest of time, everybody can look at this beautiful map that Tom made. Just to introduce myself, my name is Chris Vandenberg, and I'm a GIS specialist with Eagle. I work pretty closely with Tom and Bill and Sarah and Kevin. on all things GIS, app, AIS related. So I kind of wear a lot of hats, but it's been a pleasure to work on this with everybody. And I don't really have a formalized presentation just because I bothered Tom to put that together for me because I was in a bind at the time. So thank you, Tom. It's more of a thank you segment. Because as they both already said, we started with 2 different apps in 2021, which was a learning curve for everybody. And then we switched to one new app in this year, another learning curve for everybody. So, and through the process, we got a lot of good feedback and questions so far, just kind of troubleshooting app related technical things. And I think everybody was very helpful in helping us, figure out what we needed to do to make this efficient tool. And I think having that mindset and spirit going forward with transferring the app over to Great Lakes Commission is going to be really key to kind of keep moving things in the right direction. So I just really appreciate it, everybody's help on all things technical and app related, getting through those hurdles.
Yeah. Chris, does it make sense to talk a little bit about like, well, and maybe it changes now that we're transitioning the app, but like getting access, because Kurt was asking, there may be some other folks on here who aren't sure how that works.
Yeah,
who'd be interested in
definitely.
using. I don't know. I'm assuming it'll be similar when Great Lakes Commission starts.
Yeah, assuming
boat.
that it's going to stay in the ArcGIS online ecosystem. With anybody who wants access to the prioritization tool that Billy was showing, or our mobile apps, you can shoot me, Bill, and Tom an email. Our emails are all in that sign-in sheet that Sam sent around. And just include your ArcGIS Online username, and we'll add you to our group that grants you access to those tools. If you're having problems and you're already in that group, all the same, you can shoot me an email directly, and I can help you troubleshoot those issues. I think, as many of us have learned, ArcGIS Online is a kind of fickle beast, so it can it can be a lot of fun to troubleshoot those things with. But yeah, just shoot us an email and we'll help you get access to those tools. I was also thinking that originally I was thinking that this would be a good time to kind of have a discussion about what worked and what didn't. But I think that discussion could maybe be better suited for another meeting, or maybe a survey to capture that information from all the SISMAs. If that sounds good to you, Sam, that's kind of what my gut was telling me.
Yeah, I think that's a fine approach. I am curious how many people, you can raise your hand, maybe have utilized the app. Okay, so maybe the numbers keep going up. Okay, so maybe like a third of the folks or a quarter of the folks on this call, it seems like. If you have preliminary or, thoughts on what worked and what you could have used more guidance on, that's something that we'll definitely want to hear from you. And yeah, Chris, if you think that maybe you and Tom can help me out, we can put together some type of feedback form to get some additional insight on the app. Okay, Alex thought it was very convenient, so that's good. Does anyone else have any questions about the apps, or wants to spend a few minutes giving just initial thoughts? Yeah, Natalie, go ahead.
Hey, sorry, I can't. I'm one of the people that can't see the chat. Otherwise, I would have just typed it in there. But I know this has been really focused on survey efforts. But one thing that we found with our crew that really confused them was being out there and surveying, but also they're treating at the same time when they find it. So having to switch to a different page or app to record their treatment tracks for some reason was really difficult. So having like an option of like found but mechanically removed, or even just like chemically treated, or some mix of the two, I think would be beneficial in the future.
Yeah, definitely really good feedback there. Thank you for that, Natalie. And I definitely think, you know, hearing these things and having them all in one place, Sam, moving forward. So Tom and I can definitely work on a little feedback form with you in the near future.
I guess I have one other kind of question for the group who's used it before. What was the onboarding process to orient yourselves to these apps, and how much time do you think it took for your crews to feel confident using them?
So one of the things Eagle did with that larger project with the SISMAs is we held a training day on Saginaw Bay in the spring, and Chris came out and walked through the app and had everyone who had their phone and had enough service in that area to be able to play around and walk through and ask questions. We also think, Chris, didn't we develop a quick reference sheet for the app? I think we did. One for iOS and one for Android. So we have that stuff. It's just like a one-page sort of like step-by-step how to use and collect that data. So that's kind of the onboarding training that we've done. I'd say it certainly wouldn't hurt to maybe expand upon that or find some way of making that some kind of online little training video or something available online or something. I don't know.
And there's some comments in the chat that the training was helpful, and we are planning to do that again this year. We'll probably have a couple of different training options, hopefully another in person or a couple in person, but also some virtual ones as well. And there's also a question from Stacy in Pennsylvania, if we're interested in expanding the app to other states, and absolutely. I think we want this to be as well utilized across the basin as possible. So I'm not sure what our ability is, if there's any restrictions in terms of layers or anything that we would need to build to expand it out. I have no idea what happens in the GIS world. But I think those are things that we can make sure that we have set up so that this is useful in all of the 8 Great Lakes states and hopefully in Ontario as well.
Yeah, Sam, I think that's going to be a really key discussions going forward. But that is, I just wanted to say that is like one of the primary strengths of the ArcGIS Online environment and the Esri environments in general, is that they're very scalable. So I think the tools that we have in place will be able to, you know, accommodate that larger user base, which is really exciting.
Okay, that was all really helpful. So thanks everyone. Let's go ahead and move on to member updates. I do have 3 members who indicated they wanted to provide updates. So we'll start with them, and then if anyone else has any updates they want to provide from the last field season, we'll open up the floor. So we'll go ahead and start with Amanda Smith from Wisconsin DNR.
Sam, could I ask a quick question on the app stuff?
Oh yeah, of course.
Sorry. One of the issues we had previously with Quick Capture was running offline. and I know we had a lot of feedback in 2020, sorry, 2021. Didn't necessarily hear a lot of those complaints this past year. Is that still an issue working offline with field maps as much? Just kind of curious overall.
Hey Billy, it's Nick. I'm turning my camera on, but it sounds like in the UP it's definitely not as bad as quick capture was. However, there's still going to be those pockets that folks have experienced random streaming in the middle of collecting, and it sends a direct polygon line back to your starting
Yeah.
point. So kind of a similar issue, but it sounds like that. It's not as bad.
Okay.
So hopefully we're in the right direction. We're going in the right direction in terms of
All right.
the technology.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. I assume there are still going to be some issues. I mean, that's just kind of how remote work goes. But yeah, I mean, didn't receive hardly any email thread or email questions about that last year, which I thought was unusual. So given the issues we had with quick capture.
Yeah, and Sherry
Right.
chimed in into the chat that they also had some issues offline, but don't remember specifics.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to cut in.
All right, can you see my screen?
Not showing up on my end, Amanda. Tom's shaking his head too.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it yet. Sometimes it takes a minute with Teams.
Okay.
It's still not here.
Maybe try hitting the share again.
Okay. How about now?
Not
Still
seeing
nothing.
anything.
Oh goodness.
Amanda, if you want to quick email it to me, I can put it up on my screen and maybe someone else can go through,
Yeah.
there were a couple other people.
That sounds good. Thank you.
You can just give me an R2D2 beep when you want me to translate the slide.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, then we'll jump to Michael and then we'll come back to Amanda after. So we have Michael Hindi from Three Shores SISMA.
Yeah, can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Awesome, sounds good. I don't want to take up too much time. I just prepared kind of a brief synopsis of what we did for this summer. And I know that Nick's going to touch on some of it too as well. But our efforts kind of focused on obviously figuring out where frogbit is and some new habitats and management as well. Primarily focusing on the early detection response efforts to new habitats that it looks like frogbit could be there, but it hasn't been there historically. So let's check it out, see what there is. Checked out 17 of those sites total. 6 of those had frogbit, so it was first time detected frogbit in the habitat. 11 of those sites did not have frogbit. We had management occur across 13 different sites in the eastern UP, which consisted of hand pulling right around 50 acres of European frogbit out of the habitat. And so that's just kind of the synopsis that I had. We did survey roughly around 1,000 acres total, operating between 2 different grants, both the grant with Eagle and the grant that I believe Nick's going to talk a little bit more about. So that's just kind of a synopsis of what Three Shores SISMA did this summer.
Thanks, Michael. And maybe it would be good just to go right to Nick now to build on that.
Yeah, for sure. Can you guys? I'm just sharing my. You see my face, right? I'm not sure.
Yep, I can see your face.
So yeah, very very unique project that we put together back in 2020. We submitted an application to the MISGP Michigan Invasive Species Program to do a UP-wide frogbit detection initiative, utilizing all 5 UP SISMAs. Very cool project with the mentality of, the protocol hadn't quite been developed. The app was brand new. So this was like kind of all the stars aligned as like a really good large scale guinea pig of getting everybody across 15 counties in the UP on board, looking for European frogbit, especially since it had been detected in just the eastern UP for a while. So we're like, okay, if it exists in the eastern UP, you're a fool to think that it couldn't exist other locations. So we are on the closing, the trail end. We have about 6 months left of just simply some outreach and everything, but we've had 2 years under our belt now with this project, collectively surveying over 1,500 acres, all via kayak. This is not one particular SISMA, but once again, all 5 UP SISMAs. Very cool, utilizing the same standardized protocols, procedures. Trainings have been mentioned. We had 2 hands-on trainings, one in the East End, one actually over in Marinette, Wisconsin, getting Wisconsin partners, Great Lakes Commission, other partners. It was really a neat opportunity to have over 30 people on board right in the marsh, looking for frog bait, getting everybody on the same protocol. And same thing with uniform, consistent messaging we developed. And Eric will have to chat too for your depository of outreach materials. We've developed a European frog bait brochure, articles, and different materials for virtual workshops that all the SISMAs participated in. So all in all, just a very valuable sense of having that many SISMAs on board promoting European frog bit awareness and education in general. And as part of that, Mike just mentioned they discovered numerous new infestations. And as part of these efforts, 10 new infestations in Michigan were discovered on the Michigan side of the UP. And I was going to say probably the biggest challenge has been the app growing pains. In the UP, obviously, we all kind of know there's sometimes not the best service or lack thereof. So that's been probably the number one complaint from the SISMA coordinators, as we've discussed, has been kind of to date the inconsistencies of data collection or the challenges of the data collection. But the nice thing is all the data is going into one central hub, which is very nice. So with that, that's all I wanted to report on. It's kind of a perfect time with our conclusion of our 2-year project. So.
Thanks, Nick. And I was able to attend the one training in Wisconsin. I agree, it was a really great opportunity. Any questions for Michael or Nick?
Yeah, this is Eric Elgin. Michael or Nick, were any of those new infestation, new detections on inland waters, or are they mostly coastal?
Coastal, Eric.
Okay.
Yeah, and Mike, I'm curious, you said 50 acres of removal. Did you guys weigh it? Like how much frog bit did you get out of 50 acres?
We did. And I haven't put those numbers back together because I had a couple different data forms be separate. So once I get those numbers, I can email them to you, Tom.
I'm just curious. I'm sure we can hear about it at the next meeting.
There's a couple, I know, like there was over 1,000 pounds pulled in a single day. So it's quite a bit.
Wow. All right. Nice. Thanks.
Question about, so where you pulled that 50 acres or combined 50 acres, was it, were these isolated patches where you think maybe you were able to get a decent amount?
Yeah. And there's a couple where we found like, oh, you pulled like less than 1/10 of a garbage bag. It was hardly anything. So like those early detections, I think will make a difference. There was some where we went there and you're seeing like 200,000 plants. And so like those ones had probably been there for a while and just were never noticed in the past type of thing. So we'll have to see with the next field season.
Okay, and Tom, do you have Amanda's slides ready to go?
I do indeed.
Okay, well then, Amanda, perfect. I see him. We'll turn it over to you to hear what's going on in Wisconsin.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Yeah, Amanda Smith here in Wisconsin, and I'm the Northeast Region AIS coordinator with TNR. Next slide. And as the coordinator, I am speaking on behalf of all of our partners and everybody who's helped out with this response effort. And I'm going to go there. The Packers are having a terrible season, but the frog bite response team in Wisconsin, I think, is nailing it, in my opinion. So I'll just go through a couple slides to demonstrate that. So here's our kind of goal areas for our response team, and not surprisingly, it really mirrors the different areas of the FrogBit Collaborative. So prevention, early detection, control, and research. Next slide. So here's the FrogBit distribution in Wisconsin last year. It's kind of demonstrated by that red dashed line. And the next slide will show you what we found this year. So a lot more populations within that kind of general area, and then a couple spots outside of the original known extent, including new populations in Brown and Door counties. Next slide. We've been also doing a lot of prevention through outreach, and really targeting, specific audiences like waterfowl hunters. So this photo is a couple partners at a Wisconsin waterfowl expo, and so they were able to show I think close to 400 or 500 hunters what frogbit looks like. They have an aquarium there in the corner with live frogbit specimens, and they brought a hunting dog too. Everybody loves a dog, so they got to speak with a lot of people about frogbit. Of course, clean boats, clean waters. So we have some stats on the bottom, around 1,500 boats inspected, 4,000 plus people contacted. And then also trying to reach out to people through unique ways like this art that was inspired by frogbit. Next slide. Control, we had around 82 acres controlled in Wisconsin this year, over 5,000 pounds manually removed, and then around 46 acres of that was manually removed, and 36 acres treated with herbicide. And we had a couple group work days, including that training day that was mentioned earlier in Marinette. Next slide. And then we're also really looking forward to some research opportunities, particularly the Green Bay area is being designated as a National Estuary and Research Reserve. So it's a couple-year-long process, but 2 out of the 3 proposed national area sites have frogbit. So definitely some research opportunities there in the future, along with the collaborative, of course. And next slide. And just wanted to end with this. We've mentioned the app a couple times at this meeting, and it's just been really cool to be a part of this bigger effort and see that here on this map and really put things into context. So that's what we have for Wisconsin. Thanks.
Thanks, Amanda. That was feel really encouraged now after that update. Any questions
Good,
for
I'm glad.
Amanda?
Amanda, just a question, kind of what I mentioned for inland water bodies. Has our inland lakes being looked at that are near the coastal areas, or is it primarily coastal surveys so far?
Primarily coastal surveys. We do have a lot of partners and DNR staff and other agencies already out on lakes and other inland waters doing surveys, and we're trying to make sure that we put a plug in for frogbit and maybe take an extra couple minutes to go back into that bay that is really hard to get into or whatever, that they might not normally monitor. So, but I think in the future we'll be adding some sites for our frogbit specific effort that are more inland as we, get to know all of our coastal areas a bit more and kind of maybe do some prioritization.
Thanks.
I'm curious, other jurisdictions outside of Michigan and Wisconsin on the call, if if anyone's willing to share what efforts you've been undertaking the past couple of years for frog bit, or if you're completely new to it. I think most are probably new to it. Okay, I see Stephen, go ahead. Guessing from New York.
All right, excuse me. All right, good morning, everyone. Stephen Pearson here, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Frogbit here in New York is on our radar and is spreading across the state. Primarily, reports of frogbit are from eastern Lake Ontario, all along the Lake Ontario shoreline and associated wetlands. There are also a number of reports along the St. Lawrence River, moving downstream towards the Atlantic and the border with Canada, all along that border up to Cornwall, New York, and the St. Lawrence, and then it goes into Canada. So that's most of our distribution is there. They're Western New York, again, along Lake Ontario and in the Lake Erie watershed, has a number of reports as well. Moving eastward across New York, we have frogbit reports along the Erie Canal. So kind of moving eastward there. There are also scattered frogbit populations kind of moving downstate, as we call it, into the kind of the Hudson River Valley and the Delaware River basins. There's a single report on Long Island, and there are also reports in the Champlain Basin. There's some management efforts that are ongoing for water chestnut for European frogbit. It mostly coincides with water chestnut management, which in New York at the current time is a larger problem, more prevalent species, but they do share many of the same habitats. And so oftentimes frogbit is discovered during water chestnut management efforts and their surveys. The report from Long Island that I mentioned is in the Peconic River, which is a water body that we are treating for Ludwigia peploides. Is a native to the United States, but not native to New York State or this far north. And so we have a kind of a large scale project in the Peconic to treat Ludwigia, and simultaneously we're working to treat European frogbit in that same system. And otherwise, throughout the state, it's mostly hand pulling efforts that are occurring. So thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. I appreciate the update. Stacy, go ahead.
Hi, everybody from Pennsylvania. Just to give an update. So frogbit in Pennsylvania had been sort of contained to the northwest region of the state, here at Pymatuning, MK Goddard, neighboring gamelands, and then one little patch up along the border of New York. A report popped up on our IMAP invasives this year of some frogbit, unfortunately in northeastern PA, just outside of Wilkes-Barre. She had actually found it last summer, and then just figured out how to report it. So it is now present in northeastern Pennsylvania as well. We did our first herbicide treatments here at Pymatuning after finding the frogbit last fall. So we did about 37 acres worth of herbicide treatments along with some volunteer hand pull days. So curious to see what the results look like this coming summer. They also started doing herbicide treatments through the PA Game Commission on the lands that are bordering MK Goddard, which was a positive step in the right direction. So hopefully we'll keep it contained and make a dent in our populations.
Thanks, Stacy. Any other updates or comments? Okay, Sebastian.
Hello, my name's Sebastian with the Ohio DNR. Can't speak for all of Ohio, but I work at Oldham Creek, the National Estuary and Research Reserve, and I'm going to try and share my screen. We took a little bit. Can you all see a PDF map?
Yep, looks good.
Excellent. So we took a different approach. In years past, we would have training with 10 to 15 volunteers on how to pull frog bit, and then we would send them out. We'd have public pulls twice a month, and then the individuals would come on their own time. This year, did a little bit more targeted approach where we invited business, different companies that needed charitable days or days of service. So we had groups of 20 to 30 employees coming for a day to pull frog bit. So what the map you're looking at is Oldham Creek Estuary, roughly 200 acres of aquatic habitat wetland. And this hot zone map was created by one of our interns. So I kind of had an idea of where the density, the biggest density frog bit, where the highest density frog bit populations were. So this kind of, how do I say, it proved that we were in the right area. So I took these groups out with the help of Christina, which is, she'll be taking over this work. I guess what I'm trying to say is we targeted early, mid-May. We had excess of 20,000 rosettes pulled, but what we saw over the course of the season was a decline in vigorousness. There wasn't as much frog bit density, and so these frog bit zones, this map was created so that in the upcoming spring we could do some scouting once water temperatures hit. For us, it's about like 58 to 60 degrees where we start seeing rosettes emerge, or the rosettes emerge. So, all that to say, the main point is we did early frog bit pulls with big groups, and then throughout the rest of the season, just individuals going out. And we saw an increase pull this year, 80,000 rosettes. But in years past, we've been more in the 20 to 30,000. So this was kind of an effective way to further reduce our densities. And one other point, our water levels are changing. So right now, levels are going down from historic highs. So we do anticipate a smaller area where frog bit can persist. So with that, I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Sebastian. That's great to hear what's going on in Ohio. Anyone else want to share a brief update before we move on? Yeah, Vicky, go ahead.
Okay, so, well, yeah, we've been doing surveys and treatment on one site, but what I really wanted to point out is that we just put together this educational video that's on YouTube, and it's so I'm going to put it in the chat, the link to it. It's just about like identification and decontamination, and we're pretty proud of it, even though it's got a big silliness component. So I'm going to put that out there.
I would encourage everyone to watch it. I was chuckling when I watched it a couple weeks back. So yes, it is wonderful. Looking forward to sharing it on the website that is forthcoming. Okay, not seeing anyone else. Now we're going to move on to the really exciting part of the meeting that talks about setting up our governance structure. So I'm going to reshare my screen. Okay. So I do want to provide just a little bit of a history for those who weren't engaged since the beginning of this collaborative, as I was not engaged before last year myself. So I'll encourage anyone who had a role since its beginning, I'm looking at you guys, Eagle, to jump in if I'm missing anything important. But hopefully this will give everyone an idea of where we've come from and what resources have been developed. A lot of them we've already discussed, and then what our goals are for the next couple of years. So thinking back in 2018, there was an aquatic invasive species stakeholder workshop within the state of Michigan. And at that time, European frogbit was identified as a species of concern within the state. And this was the catalyst that initiated the formation of the Michigan-centric European Frogbit Collaborative. And it really signified the need for a management strategy that focused on addressing the uncertainties surrounding frogbit management. Because as most of you know, we don't have all of the necessary tools in the toolbox right now to combat this problem. So shortly thereafter that meeting, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative provided funding through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, or EAGLE, and then that was subawarded to Central Michigan University. Once this initial supporting structure was established, they then began to develop some of the resources that we have today, such as the Adaptive Management Framework. Central established a technical advisory group, and stakeholders across Michigan were engaged and encouraged to participate. So this was the initial structure quite a few years ago of the collaborative. And Central provided a lot of that initial support that the Great Lakes Commission is taking over now. So the Adaptive Management Framework was developed between 2018 and 2020. I'm not going to go over it in detail today, but we are going to spend some time evaluating it and reassessing it based on what Michigan has learned from its implementation and seeing how it can be expanded and adapted to fit the region more broadly. And it was, so the Adaptive Management Framework was then formally introduced just last year at a meeting in March, so about a year and a half ago. And I know Michigan's been doing a lot of work and has received funding for its implementation within the state. So beginning in 2020, jumping forward a couple of years, EAGLE and CMU spent some time doing some maybe internal soul searching and evaluated their role in the collaborative. And at that time, CMU decided to take a step back in their facilitation role. And so then last year at the meeting that Tom provided a nice overview of at the beginning of today, the Great Lakes Commission was asked to present on our experience administering other species-specific collaboratives, such as the Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative and the Invasive Mussel Collaborative, and then give an overview on what effective collaborative governance looks like from our end. So following that meeting, we were approached to provide administrative support to the collaborative, and we've since pursued interjurisdictional funding. So that project idea was put forth through states and tribes through the interjurisdictional funding process, and Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding was awarded to the GLC to provide this backbone support for the next 2 years. So that funding was awarded as of the beginning of last month, so just October 2022. So now that we have this administrative structure in place, we're really hoping that we can expand this beyond just Michigan and a little bit into Wisconsin, but also encourage participation from all of the Great Lakes states and provinces and territories. So within our funding objectives, we have kind of three main categories of goals that we want to achieve over the next couple of years. First and foremost, we want to enhance and expand the Frogbit Collaborative. So this is what we're starting off doing today. We're going to formalize a governance structure and expand membership so that it's representative of Great Lakes jurisdictions beyond Michigan. And so really appreciate everyone tuning in today and participating from outside. And we're hoping to grow over the next couple of months prior to the field season to make sure that we have wide representation and we're providing the tools that the region needs. We also want to establish a communication network for the European Frogbit community. So this is going to be both internally, internal collaborative communication network, but also externally as well. And so we'll do this in two main ways, through our website, which will be getting up and around in the next couple of months. And then, like Eric talked about, beginning a webinar series and leveraging other existing platforms to share the resources that this group has built and is currently working to refine. And then finally, identify priority sites for European Frogbit management. So this is, I think, most everyone on this call today, your goal is controlling or preventing this species within your jurisdictions. And so we want to help foster that and build off of the existing apps that have been developed through Eagle and through Misson, and help identify and communicate best practices for European Frogbit control. And apologies for my voice going. Okay, so here's the governance structure. It might look familiar if you attended the previous collaborative meeting in December of 2021. But this is generally how at the commission we recommend structuring collaboratives. So there's this larger collaborative body, and this includes members that are representative of the area that we're trying to influence. There is sometimes a core team, but always a steering committee. And then there are work groups who provide this not transient, but task-based work that may dissolve once that work has been completed. And there's a backbone support, which provides a lot of the administration to the overall collaborative. The collaborative also has an external impact as well. So there's the stakeholder community, which I would consider mainly to be those impacted by European Frogbit within the basin, but also beyond the basin in the Great Lakes states and provinces as well. And we regularly interact with subject matter experts. These might be academics, these might be those outside of the region to influence and help us refine the work that we're doing. So before I jump into that, into the more nitty-gritty of how we define each of these groups, any questions on the history of the collaborative or where we're going in the next couple of years?
I wanted to jump in just real quick. So after the initial part of the collaborative, it pretty quickly expanded, and we had folks outside of Michigan, some federal folks participating. So it started out with a Michigan focus, but it did it was already pulling people in even in the second year, I think, from other states and areas. So it kind of is, I'm really excited that it's more formal and it's going to be bigger. And yeah, just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. That's good context. So I'm going to start off with what the role is of the Neutral Backbone organization, which is going to be the staff at the Great Lakes Commission, where I'm at. So the main benefit of having this Neutral Backbone support is that all of you on this call, your day jobs include way more than just frogbit. You are working on other invasive species. You have other things that you're responsible for, and to expect all of you to maintain a website and to organize meetings and to pull together resources and potentially, you know, contract development of specific resources, maybe the applications, it's going to slow progress down a lot. And obviously, there's been some really great work that's already happened, but I think we can really speed up the progress and speed up our learning of maybe not necessarily our learning, but speed up the impact that we have as a collaborative if you have a dedicated body whose job is to do all of that nitty-gritty administrative support for the collaborative. And so that's what we're here to do. A lot of what you'll see from us is going to be fostering the decisions that the various groups, such as the steering committee or the work groups, what they decide, and then helping to facilitate both communication networks and our website and the work groups, meetings, etc. So you can rely on us for a lot of the administrative side of things and developing materials that has fallen on just a couple of individuals in the past. So we have that support now and that capacity that we're able to provide those resources for this group. And so members now, this is a decision that this larger group is going to have to make on what their formalized membership looks like. For the Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative and the Invasive Mussel Collaborative that the Great Lakes Commission currently provides that neutral backbone support for, our membership looks a little bit different from each other, from either collaborative, but that's because of the main goals of the collaborative. Phragmites is a little bit more focused on outreach and engaging on the ground managers and connecting research with management actions, while the Invasive Mussel Collaborative is more focused on advancing the development of control tools and opportunities. So it's less focused on prevention, less focused on awareness, interacting with the public, and more focused on how can we control, how can we build up our toolbox. So based on the goals of this collective group, that's going to define what our membership base looks like. If I just quickly jump back, this broader stakeholder community does benefit from the work of the collaborative, but the collaborative members do have some responsibilities to participate. So we want to make sure that our membership is representative of the perspectives of the various agencies and organizations where they're coming from, that members are providing input and feedback on collaborative activities and are actively participating in meetings, calls, webinars, any requests for email input. And I did pull this, you can see I pulled this from the Invasive Mussel Collaborative, so apologies for that. But We want to make sure that this group is providing input on what the priority needs are and what the communication needs are, what products we need to develop, and then making sure that you're taking all that we're doing within the collaborative and then reporting it back throughout your own agency and organization networks as well to make sure that our reach is broader. So those are the general expectations of what a member is. Obviously, members don't necessarily need to participate in every work group or in every call, but we want to make sure that we have representation from the various SISMAs, CWMAs, PRISMs, from the state agencies who are actively engaged in this work. So that brings us to the steering committee. The steering committee is this kind of subgroup of the collaborative that really holds a lot of the decision-making authority. Generally, a steering committee is a really small subset of collaborative membership, about 4 to 6 members. They're expected to provide input on meeting topics and agendas, solicit input from members to identify issues that should be considered and put forth through the collaborative, assist identifying subject matter experts and members who can provide updates and briefings at the meeting, encourage active participation, monitor collaborative participation and identify possible membership additions or removals if it came to that, and generally guiding collaborative operations to maximize the achievement of our agreed upon goals and objectives. So the role of the steering committee is really to work with the GLC in planning and facilitating meetings and other collaborative functions. So when I say the decision-making authority lies within the steering committee, what this group is this group is going to hopefully be able to work with the rest of the membership to identify high priority issues and bring those to the top of the list and help come up with ways to address them. So the steering committee is an important group to a successful collaborative governance structure. Let me quick jump back. So you could see that I have this subset that influences or works with the core team or the steering committee called the core team. The core team for other collaboratives is generally a further administrative body. Oftentimes they work closely with the Neutral Backbone organization on acquiring funding and other financial and political support. Generally, the core team is the kind of idea champions or the initial members of the collaborative. I think in this case, I would suggest that we don't have a core team because we don't have any funding agreements that are tied up with various agencies like we do for the Phragmites or the Invasive Mussel Collaborative. I think this group would really not be necessary for our current structure, but we'll leave that up to membership to decide. I think the steering committee really will serve the purpose of any core team, and it would just cause confusion to have this additional group. And then finally, there's work groups. So collaboratives can form work groups to explore specific issues and develop draft products for the collaborative to consider. Ultimately, when products are put forward, they're by work groups, they are sent to the larger collaborative group for approval before they're released. But work groups are really nice ways to have a set of internal and potentially external partners work together on developing or addressing needs and products that have been identified by the larger group. Work groups are going to structure themselves around a series of objectives, and they'll generally establish a written charge with assistance from the steering committee that gives specific and timely goals and objectives on what they're trying to accomplish. There are some collaboratives who hold standing work groups, and they kind of have ongoing tasks that they're trying to accomplish. But oftentimes, work groups are a little bit more transient and will dissolve once their tasks have been completed. In all decisions within the collaborative, we try to reach consensus wherever possible. So consensus is really going to be defined as all can live with the decision, and anyone who isn't comfortable with the decision or can't live with it has the opportunity to explain their reasons and offer an alternative. So once we formalize our membership and once we formalize our structure, this is how we'll move forward making decisions in the future. Everyone is going to be given a voice, and everyone is going to be given opportunities to provide alternatives as they see fit. Okay, so that was my set of very boring slides, so I apologize for that. But I want to pause. Any questions on governance before we move on to steering committee nominations, or any questions or thoughts? Yeah, Rachel, go ahead.
Hi, I was just wondering, how often do you think that the committee would meet on an annual basis?
Yep, that's a great question. So I think generally, depending on what the need is, the commitment is going to be meeting either monthly with a kind of potentially quarterly if there aren't a lot of needs. It's really hard to estimate, but I did put like a 3 to 5 hours per month on time commitment for the steering committee. It kind of ebbs and flows. Some months might be more, some months might be less. We do have funding currently for 2 years, so I think this would be a 2-year commitment, and then we'll kind of reevaluate after. Does anyone feel strongly on having a core team?
I feel strongly that we should follow your recommendations since you've been doing this and you know what's going on. How does that sound?
Sounds great, Tom. Thanks.
I would echo Tom's comments. I don't feel like, from what you've explained and what we chatted about previously, that really the core team is really necessary in this case.
So what I want to do right now is open up the floor for nominations and volunteers to serve on the steering committee. And if we can come up with a reasonable list, what we can do is put out those names as suggested nominations, and we can see if we can establish a consensus via email to get that steering committee established. If there are more volunteers or nominations, then we have, the 4 to 6 slots available, then I think we can explore other options, such as some virtual voting as well. So I'll open the floor up to nominations. And Sarah put in a comment, consider work group chairs should be on a steering committee. That's definitely something we can have work group chairs serve as formal steering committee members, or we can have them be temporary members of the steering committee and attend meetings. We've had it go both ways in the past, so that is definitely one way you could have it go, is have them be formal members, or they could be kind of honorary members attending meetings and providing updates on work group activities.
Do you have a recommendation either way, Sam?
No, I think it's gonna be, I think so. If we look at who our steering committee, or I'm sorry, who our work group members are now, they are 2 from the state of Michigan and 1 from working within Michigan. So I'd like to ideally have a steering committee that's representative a little bit more broadly. Given that, I think it might be advisable to have them be kind of honorary steering committee members and attend the meetings and provide input, but not hold the kind of decision-making authority. And that's not to say that steering or that work group chairs can serve a dual role either. If one or more would like to volunteer, or someone would like to nominate them.
Hey, this is Sebastian with Ohio DNR. We work closely with the Cleveland Metro Parks, Mark Warman, and he does a lot of AIS work along the shoreline. So I'd like to nominate Christina Babette. She's our stewardship technician, to be on the steering committee for an Ohio representative. And yeah, I'll reach out to Mark Warman to see if he could be a second as well.
Thanks, Sebastian. I see Christina, you're on the call. Do you accept this nomination?
Yes, I accept.
Okay, and then I have Matt Puz with Wisconsin DNR. All around awesome human, which is definitely top requirement for serving on the steering committee.
I accept.
I think it would be great if we could have someone from kind of the original administering body of the collaborative serve on the steering committee, to have that historical knowledge.
Are you looking for me, or are you looking for somebody else? I heard you say historical knowledge, and I know that means, like, you know, the one with the laugh lines. I'm happy to participate in any way, but also leaving space for other people to step up.
Yeah, I was just about
nominate
to,
if you want.
I was just about to nominate Nick Castle myself, since he's one of the OGs. I didn't ask him if he wants to be nominated, but too bad.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. The only thing I'd throw out there is I think Mike Hindi has been pretty active in quite a bit of this now, and I think Mike, jump on here if you're still around, but I think you were willing to participate.
Yeah, sure. Nick, you do a great job of representing the entire UP too, so that's why I'd throw your name back in there. But otherwise, I'd be happy to help out as well.
Sarah, was that a volunteer for an Eagle representative? Is that what I heard? Maybe you?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Okay. Okay, any other nominations? I think we have 4, maybe 5 right now. Okay, we will put out a final call for nominations and the suggested list. Thank you for those of you who agreed after your name was put forth or volunteered yourself. It is not meant to be a kind of burdensome commitment. It's mostly just to help represent those within your jurisdictions and help guide the work of the collaborative moving forward. We generally rely heavily on members and work group participants to do a lot of the heavy lifting along with ourselves at the commission to provide or to take away, I guess, a lot of that administrative burden. Okay. So that is all that we have on our agenda. We have a couple of minutes left. Are there any additional agenda items or comments that have come up?
As I'm scrolling back through the chat, I'm realizing we didn't actually address the access stuff. Alex, Florian, did you get access to the Esri stuff that you were trying to get? We were having some issues before, but I think he's still on.
Oh, Tom, I told everybody to shoot us an email
Okay.
with their username, and so
Okay.
we can get them added to the group.
Oh, is he maybe not part of? Yeah, that makes sense. Southwest. Yeah, he might not be. Okay, thanks. I just didn't know if we had resolved that. Thank you.
Sam, I had dropped a comment just as you were presenting and as I was looking at the adaptive management framework, you touched on some key ideas about evaluating that framework to see how we might want to use it, looking at governance structure and work groups. The one thing that wasn't specifically called out was strategy 4 in the current adaptive management framework, which is titled informational needs, but it's really like a research type group. And, thinking about how some of the other collaboratives operate that have a research focused work group or something like that. I just wanted to mention for the benefit of the group, my long comment, that's another maybe shorter term thing that we would want to think about if we want to have a 4th work group to talk more specifically about research, or if that's something that we handle in a different way. Because I think it's currently a little bit of a blind spot for the group. And I can't recall exactly why we did it that way. It might have just been there was so much going on in the beginning and a lot of different research projects that we didn't really have time to step back and think about additional unmet information needs and things like that. So putting it out there for the record.
So noted. Thanks, Sarah. That will be something good to consider as we move forward. Okay. Well, I think just to give everyone an idea of what our next steps are. So we're going to hopefully within the next 2 weeks have our steering committee established, and I would like to put a meeting on the calendar for that group. And then we'll really start, hitting the ground running, making some decisions, making progress, getting those applications transferred over, providing those support. At least beginning of the new year, we'll hold work group meetings for each of the 3 work groups. Please feel free to attend any and all work group meetings that you're interested in. And then from there, we'll explore the idea of having a pre-field season collaborative call once again, and where we can do a little bit more updating on some of the additional resources that we've been working on, and hopefully get some feedback on what some appropriate field season plans are for this collaborative group. Okay, thanks everyone. We'll end right on time. Look at that. Despite my addition errors in the agenda. Hey, it was really nice seeing everyone today. Thanks so much, and I'll be in touch soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.